off a little bit, so I don't want to wait too long to get started. So good afternoon to everyone, at least on the East Coast. My name is Moish Peltz. I am a partner at Falcon Rappaport and Berkman, which is a full-service business law firm based in the New York City metro area. I head our intellectual property practice as well as our emerging technologies practice, and which leads to a great background into NFTs and to our topic of our presentation today, which is going to be focusing in part on emerging technologies and intellectual property, but more so on the artistic side of things, which is leading me to Juliette Yuan, who is our co-moderator of this panel. And thank you, Juliette, for joining us. Juliette is a New York-based art, is the chair of the New York-based art consulting firm, Juliette Yuan and Associates, where she is a consultant specializing in post-war, contemporary, and digital arts. And her firm is based in the Upper East Side of Manhattan, where she provides boutique services to international clients, assisting them in building art collections and managing their passion of assets strategically. So Juliette, thank you so much for co-presenting with me today. And I'll turn it over to you to introduce our panelists and the topic of our discussion today.
Thank you, Moish. Thank you, Moish, for your kind introduction. And good afternoon. And I don't know which part you are in front of your screen, but in New York, we're in the afternoon, 12 p.m. So good afternoon, everybody, for taking your time and joining our panel. First of all, let me introduce shortly our panel, what's about and what the topics we're going to talk about here. So the art capital, NFTs, and the social values is a two-part conversational event. So today we're having the first session, and the second part will be on June 25th. We'll give further information when we end the panel. The program is co-presented by Falcon Rappaport Berkman PLLC law firm. Moish, I wish that I correctly pronounced your law firm's name. And also, yes, by my own firm, Juliette Yuan, Associate Art Consultancy in New York City. So our intention is actually to invite some experts from different sectors to review NFT's recent development and prospects together, discuss and reassess the digital arts definition, aesthetics, and market value in crypto time, especially how cryptocurrency and NFTs can contribute to art, the financial industry, the economy, and human society. So as the blockchain technology and NFTs keep evolving, we hope that this event will provide a platform for everyone here to share ideas and perspectives, ask good questions, hopefully, rather than give definitive answers. So now let me introduce our speakers. We have the great pleasure of having some world-leading figures from the mainstream art world sharing their knowledge, insight, and experiences working with blockchain technology and NFTs today with us. Sylvain Lévy, I will start from our world-known art collector from France. Along with his wife, Dominique Lévy, he is one of the principals of the DSL collection, a major collection of Chinese contemporary art. However, well, in the contemporary art, Chinese contemporary art, there are many pieces that are digital art. However, from my knowledge, what makes Sylvain really well known is not only the collection, but also his passion for cutting-edge technologies and how he could always use the latest technology to present his museum online. We will explore further in the conversation. Next to Sylvain, we have John F. Simon Jr. John is one of the pioneers in the development of software art. He is renowned for, I hope I make this perfectly, articulating the use of code in digital and multimedia art since the mid-80s. And next to John, we have Claudia Hart, who is a pioneer artist in 3D animation, virtual reality, and augmented reality art. She is also a professor at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. She has been active as an artist, curator, and critique since 1988. And we owe a special thanks to Claudia Hart, who was actually not so well last night, and she still joined us today. I hope you are feeling fine, Claudia. Okay, thank you. Okay, so if our speakers do not have any additional information to share with our audience, we will just open our conversation. Sylvain, you are muted.
Perhaps I shall say, in the Middle Age, there was something called terra incognita, unknown territories. And I think that this discussion is, for me, part of this unknown territories in which we are entering today, and especially from a point of view of someone who has been collecting for 37 years. I can tell you that the new decade seems to be very different from what used to happen before. So I'm very interested to listen to the other speakers, because I hope that there will be a kind of lighthouse for me in this kind of unknown territory.
I only know that Moish and I prepared a lot of questions for you. So we will see how unknown we can go, we can push. Okay. Moish, do you have anything to add before we open the conversation?
No, just that I'm thrilled. Thank you for introducing everyone. I'm thrilled to have everyone here today, and looking forward to kicking off. So Juliette, let's get started.
Okay. Okay, so there we go. To just remind everybody of the situation we're facing in the past few months. The conversation actually comes from the major auction houses' groundbreaking sales on their NFTs, which disrupted, that was the word that we see the most often in the major media. The phenomenon disrupted the public consciousness, especially the traditional art world. It caused complex feelings from artists, curators, art critics, gallerists, and museum professionals. There was a lot of confusion, anxiety, and frustration, but at the same time, we also feel a lot of curiosity, excitement, and hope. So along with all these agitations came endless and intense debates over digital art's history, market value, and its impact on energy saving and environmental issues. Shortly after the NFT's explosion, many artists, curators, and gallerists in the mainstream art world were proactively engaged in discussions, exhibitions, and logged on different blockchain platforms to experiment with NFTs, also to reach out to broader collectors in new industries. So my first question goes for Claudia and John, our two artist speakers. When did you start paying attention to blockchain technology and NFT and experimenting with them? How did you react to the NFT explosion? And how did you position yourself in this turbulence of debates, manifestos, and movements? Whoever wants to start, you're welcome.
Juliette, do you want us to show work while we do this, or pure verbal?
However you want to manage it in the most comfortable way.
John, do you want to, I mean, I feel like I have to show pictures.
Yeah, you should show work.
Yeah. So anyway, then I'm going to share, because I want to say that I started the interest in this with a body of work that I began a couple of years ago, where I was investigating issues about copyright. And so tracing a line of history that has to do with forgery, copyright, identity, and then blockchain was the next. Before the panel started a few moments ago, we were talking about the NFT space as a gamified space, and the players taking the role of avatars. And I'm keeping that in mind. I'm going to show this, which is really where I started. This body of work a couple of years ago, where, to give a little preamble, I teach a class in the Art Institute Museum, in which with my students, we make we use the paintings in the collection as trackables and make augmented reality app, which I'm calling the romantic app, using the works in the collection, and they integrate animation and video and things in that. And I've been doing that for 5 or 6 years, and we ran into walls that had to do with copyright. There was a lot of anxiety about infringing on copyright, and therefore Gloria Groom, who's the director of the entire old wing at this point, she invited me into her wing, telling me, you don't have to worry, we are all public domain. So my students and I started working with Impressionism and Post-Impressionism. And I found at that point that the linchpin in this whole story was Matisse, and that Matisse, some of them were in the modern wing and some were in this historical wing, and I didn't understand why. And Gloria told me it's about copyright. Matisse was the beginning of copyright in terms of artworks. And Picasso is totally in the modern wing because it's all copyright. So I made a game. So my piece, I did a show in the fall at Bitforms Gallery. I'd been working on the work for several years. It hit when then COVID hit, but I was already working on it. And I wanted to respond also and so I responded both to COVID and also to this research about copyright. And I made a kind of imaginary game in which I created a labyrinth, and I'm going to play a little of it. It was imagining the game was a labyrinth of art history that we couldn't escape. And I, as the player, was making low-res polygon models of masterpiece paintings by Matisse and Picasso, and put them in a labyrinth that you enter but can never get out. So I'm going to play a little bit of that. The ultimate aim of all visual arts is the complete building. To embellish buildings was once the noblest. Oops, sorry about that.
I don't want to be rude, Claudia, just
Yeah.
as a reminder of the time, because we have 1 hour to
All right.
finalize the panel. Yes.
All right, but this,
Thank you.
just showing it briefly, because the whole basis of the practice and my NFT practice is based on these little forgeries I made of famous paintings as low-res polygon models. At that point, I decided, wait, I'm going to turn down the audio. At that point, I decided that I wanted to sell the forgeries as authentic works of art, and that meant NFTs. At that point in the fall, the big boom of the NFT market hadn't quite happened yet, but I enjoyed this idea, the paradox that I could use the distributed network of the blockchain to create my imaginary forgeries of Matisse and Picasso still lives and make them authentic and unique by means of the blockchain, by means of making a token out of them. That was the beginning. And as I went further into this, I it took over basically everything I was doing, and I became very obsessed and interested. So that was starting from about 2 years ago. For example, this was, I was in that Christie's auction, and this is my Matisse forgery that I made, where I'm sort of, oh no, this wasn't the one in it, this was another. I made a couple of sort of translations of of Matisse paintings. This is the one in Christie's was actually this one. And numbers of other works. I've been functioning mostly on art NFT sites. That means that's part of one of the topics that I think we'll be talking about, which is the relationship of digital art, the tradition of digital art, and the new artists who've emerged in the context of the NFT platform. And I would say that you can find that also with there's a variety of NFT platforms out there, and the ones that are dealing with, if you think of art as something that has a history and imagines a future, and thinks about what the function of art is in the present and what it should be in the future, I think you see artists who've been who've been working with NFT within that discussion since there were the first NFTs. So for example, Kevin McCoy just sold the first NFT for $1.5 million in the Sotheby's auction. But there isn't any kind of uniform, I would say, blanket that you can put over the whole thing. It's just like with regular art, is that you see a range.
So to recap, it sounds like for you, Claudia, that it was a natural extension of the art you were already doing. It was just a new way to exploit it, perhaps in a slightly different medium. So John, how about you? What was your experience like in terms of coming to NFTs?
Great, thank you for calling on me. I'm going to share my screen now. And it's so interesting that Claudia's trajectory through copyright, I can present a different trajectory and also show that ideas that were present in work pre-NFT are now finding expression in NFTs. And I thought about it today. I think we're at a very similar moment to when we were in the early 90s when the web browsers were first coming online and people were discovering they could share images on the World Wide Web. There were tons of images on people's hard drives and people were doing amazing digital art projects, and all of a sudden there was an incredible way to share them. And I think now we're seeing in the NFT space that there's an incredible amount of inventory that is looking for a way to be distributed, and the NFTs are providing that model. So I'm showing an early project. This is from '97. It was Every Icon. It was a software artwork. It's still running. It's running now, and it basically goes through and shows every possible icon that can be drawn on a 32 by 32 grid, which is the original Macintosh desktop icon. And just to sum it up quickly, to finish one line of all the variations of the icon takes 3 months, and to finish up 2 lines of it takes 500 million years. So there's tons and tons of possible images out there to be done. It seemed like we could coin a lot of NFTs out of all these icons that are possible. So here it was, and I tried to find a way to distribute it. This is in '97, and I made applets. I made Palm Pilot apps. I made iPhone apps. I even encapsulated it on screens on the wall. But what it was a piece of software, a piece of digital art that was looking for a way to be distributed. I sold, hundreds of Every Icon applets, and they were numbered in an edition. So there was that kind of ownership, that value of ownership that NFTs give. But there was no way for anyone else who had one to exchange them. There were a lot of barriers to that. And also, people did not expect to pay very much for software. So, there was no competition for the price. So this was an idea that was out there roaming around. Then I turned to a project called Color Panel, where I took another set of code and I encapsulated it on a screen onto the wall. And then I made a set of these. Sorry, this picture takes a second to load. Oh, there we go. Okay, so there's the set of 12, an edition of 12. This was a way to, again, I'm looking for a way to distribute software. How does software get out there? How does it get sold? How does it get transmitted into the world? And the way to do it in a profitable way in 1999, when this piece was made, was to take the whole computer, take it apart, back it with plastic, put it on the wall, and let it run that way. These were a successful piece. Every icon was in the Whitney Biennial in the year 2000, and color panel is in the collection of the Guggenheim Museum and the Whitney Museum here in New York. So it was a kind of a novelty to have a way of distributing software. Also, it's really hard to explain that to have a flat screen, a color screen on the wall at that time was still a novelty. Now we walk around with screens, this good all over. So
I will take over, John. I will take over the conversation from there. Since you mentioned that your works are, like Claudia, both you and Claudia, your works are among the permanent collections in really the most prominent museums in the world, such as MoMA, the Guggenheim Metropolitan Museums, and among many others. So in terms of your professional identity, I have a question. When when the three major auction houses define Beeple, Pack, and Mad Dog Jones as the pioneers and visionaries in digital art, was NFT a disruption for you and Claudia, for your career? And since you two as pioneers in your own world, did you feel frustrated and challenged by the three auction houses' definition on digital art and the NFT stars' identities?
Well, I have to say it was, for me, it was quite thrilling to see that much attention being paid to digital work, which we'd been trying to get for a long time. And I'm a believer that the rising tide will lift all boats. So I think the more that's going around and the more it's talked about, the more opportunities there are. There's so many shows for digital work happening through NFTs. So I think it's a great opportunity.
And how about you?
I do too, totally. And I think it started with COVID because people obviously were in their homes, and I was working a lot with social VR. So it was a way people could gather within these artworks that I was making, these sort of game spaces that were interactive. But it was not, people were discovering, John, that there was digital art, but they still didn't think it could be monetized or didn't take it seriously. I was very busy the NFT hitting. It was like the world discovered me, but they still didn't think they had to pay me. And what's been amazing is that what happened with this big blow up was that the shock of it was that we might be the scarcity principle, that the block distributed identity on the blockchain as identity of uniqueness, and the authenticity and the aura of uniqueness could be applied to us. And I think I shocked a few people when I said, oh, by the way, I'm taking back all my social VRs, and because I'm going to put them on the blockchain. And so I think, the idea mostly, I'm looking John right in the eye, although you can't tell, is that like we existed, but not in the same way because there wasn't money attached to us. And that's the culture that we are in. And so we were given second class status. And
Yes, thank you. So here I'd like to engage Sylvain in our conversation. Actually, in the past months, there is a key question for me, maybe not for everybody, but it was a key question for me that was not so much mentioned by the art media. Maybe it was avoided intentionally, I'm not sure. So I really would like to have the answer from you, especially Sylvain. Do you think it's a moment with NFT involved in the digital art now, or an extension? Do you think it's the moment for us to, or is it indispensable for us to redefine what is digital art now? It's about the definition. Is it necessary to do that? How do you understand this transition? Sylvain, would you like to open the conversation?
I think that first, it's interesting to define what is art today before defining what is digital art. It's interesting to define what is a museum today. I think that we have to, I should say, not reinvent, but at least to update what is art in the eyes of the consumer or the art of the public. Coming back to what you say, I think it's interesting. It's interesting to see how things happen. You know, you said that some of the digital works were already in museum, but it's not the institution who has institutionalized these works. It's the market. It's the social networks. So it's interesting to see that art today is how art is made and how art is disseminated and how art is valued. And I think this is very important, is that we have changed the way, the traditional way, where I shall say art was, I shall say, cooked from the producer to the consumer, if I can speak in a very, perhaps in a very vulgar way. So this is my first reaction to your question. But I think that one thing is very important for me, and you know, what we've been doing with the SL, if I can speak a few minutes on the collection, a few minutes. Since 2005, we tried to speak the language of our time. This is why we went digital. This is why in 2005 we went on internet. Then we went on we went on to the museum, Second Life, virtual reality, games, and today social VR platforms. Because we think that we have to speak the language of our time. And the language of our time is the digital in a certain way, and more than in a certain way. Because today, Juliette, you and me, and all the people here, we have a digital twin. And this digital twin spends between 4 to 6 hours in a digital world. It's called now the metaverse. And in this metaverse will happen a lot of things with different types of emotion and different types of desire. And the digital work is part of the NFT, will be part of this metaverse. I don't know how, but it will be part of this metaverse. Like the Gucci NFT was sold in a kind of the metaverse, I shall say, world. So I think it's part of the way that the society is evolving. But it's like this that I look at NFT as a way to try to mirror the new, I shall say, the new human being, which is being, I shall say, created with this, I shall say, new digital world in which we're living, this metaverse in which we're living.
I would like to follow up with your comments on the interaction between institutional art and the art market, Sylvain, because today what's happening and what frustrates the traditional, if I may use this term, because we really don't know how to define the different sections between crypto art and digital art. We used to know. I think everything is evolving, so the definitions are evolving as well. However, what frustrates the traditional art world is actually the market, because the market is really going crazy just with the auctions, and it's pretty dominating, especially for the traditional digital artists' careers. So if I may track the records a little bit, take just 1 minute to track all the auction records. We have Christie's which had 6 auctions until today, with of course the highest record was Beeple's collage, sold for $69 million in March, and Phillips had one, very humble, with Mad Dog Jones, sold for $41 million, and Sotheby's actually just closed their recent auction, the native digital, yesterday. With Kevin McCoy's Quantum, the work name Quantum, as the first NFT that was sold with 1.4 million. Anyway, I'm not going to repeat all the big numbers, but the phenomenon between the crypto art world and the digital art world that we used to know is also this big market value. There is a big gap between the crypto art stars and also the traditional digital artist works, no matter how pioneer they are in their own world. So my question is, how do we understand as you're a collector? Maybe you do have the answer, maybe you don't, but I'd like to really hear how you feel about this gap, the value of the digital art, especially imagine if I were a collector, I'm new and I'm interested in collecting some digital art pieces, and I'm your friend, Sylvain. I come to you, I ask you, Sylvain, you are expert in digital art. I'd like to start collecting digital art, but how should I start? The prices are the price range is so large. How should I understand this?
But I will tell you a very simple example, an example for the collection. We just collected the first NFT. And I will explain the process that we've done. First, we made our homework. Like everything, we take our time. I think life is plenty of time. There is plenty of artists, and so we don't have to hurry. I think managing time is something very important in the collection. And there was an exhibition organized in Beijing by JY&A, and with Crypto ZR. And JY&A is one of for me, the most I've been following for at least 15 years as a curator, especially of digital art. And so when he made this exhibition with this artist, we collect the work, because we believe that if JY&A has decided to create an exhibition like this with this artist, it means that the work and the artist, perhaps they are using NFT, but they are also, I shall say, artists in the way we conceive what is art. So I think that, once again, if you look at the NFT through the crypto money, if you look at the NFT through the hype, you will have another way to look at things. If you look at the NFT as a way to discover a new type of medium used by, I shall say, even traditional artists, perhaps it's coherent with a collection. And we will stay in this way to look at NFT. It means that for us, and coming back to the difference of prices, even in the art world, there is many difference of prices between, I shall say, the usual suspects and the others. So I don't think that the NFT is immune in this kind of the winners take it all position in the art world. So it's just a mirror of the way how the market is built and by whom the market is built, whatever it is, NFT or the other things. So it's okay. They made 68 million. I'm happy for the seller. I don't know if I'm happy for the buyer, but it's not my problem. It's okay. It's his money. If he's happy, I'm happy for him. That's it. I'm not going to change my way to look at things because of a number.
Thank you, Sylvain. Before Moish takes over the conversation, I have my last question for the two artists here. Since we are talking about the market, so we'd love to know how you manage your NFT business today. I noticed that John has been very low-key since the beginning. Maybe you want to share why you chose to be low-key with the NFT movement. And Claudia was proactively engaged in all sorts of events since the beginning. And you both are logged on some different blockchain platforms to experiment with NFTs. So how is your experience today? And my question is, do you feel the NFT brings you more freedom and power as artist? Did it increase actually your sales and bring your new markets and collectors? Do you think that you need to adjust a little bit your aesthetics to provide different artwork to adapt to the NFT market's needs and collectors' tastes, or you can just remain the same, provide the same artworks?
I can say that I'd sort of like to show the work that I talking about because it's so abstract. But for me, because I was dealing with identity and my work took a feminist and still does position, I was very interested in blockchain, not in terms of market, but in terms of ontology, that it's a way of defining truth through inscription in a distributed, encrypted inscription on the ledger. The ledger is what they call the distributed network of the blockchain. And through that, you could also write yourself, write your own identity within that. You actually legally can. And I was very interested in the smart contracts. I did something called the Feminist Manifesto on the blockchain, and I posted it on Instagram, and it has then became part of it, an NFT. It's been written about and published a lot and keeps being so, because I was thinking more about identity and identity politics. That's why, and the idea of authenticity and truth. So for me, it's a big cultural shift about that. And vis-a-vis the market, COVID changed the market for me anyway, because of the interest in virtuality, generally in terms of art. And I wouldn't say the NFT made more or less difference. The big shift is in the larger art world as discovery of digital art. And I want to just close by saying I was on a panel, several panels, and I was on a very highly attended panel because Jerry Saltz and Kenny Schechter were on the panel, and it was done by the Smithsonian. And people wrote me after in the audience saying things very sweet, but surprising to me, saying, I knew there must be something like that out there. I knew you must all exist, meaning digital art. I knew that it was artists or people within the larger art community who were discovering for the first time that there are a few galleries and a few specialists, but it was a closed, more privatized space, the digital art space, and now it's not.
John, would you like to take it over?
Sure. I would always make a distinction in my work between code-based, software-based work and video work. And it's always been really important to me that the artwork has a living quality, that it's actually computing what you see. So I never regarded the still images or the video images much more than a record of that. But seeing in the NFT space that people were willing to pay for a single still image, which I'm not sure I still get, but I get a little better because my son is a video gamer, and he showed me the Steam community market and places like that, where that generation is very comfortable collecting and trading completely digital items that are not useful, for instance, in a game. They're just cosmetic. But they have some value, they have some rarity, and they're changed for real dollars. So I can kind of see it. So I began to sort of understand that. Then I had a series of conversations with a good friend of mine, Mark America, who might actually be here today. And we sort of puzzled the thing out because, yeah, NFTs were out there, but did they really fit the work? And then there was a sort of a wave of putting older work. So I have a number of pieces on OpenSea and on Rarible, where I've taken videos of software running that I've made and digital images I've made to see how they looked in the NFT space and how they would play out and be received. And then I started to look at old software and how it could be changed and incorporated into the medium, and I was doing things like filming software on the screen and processing video. So my piece on foundation is a kind of a processed piece. And it turned out there are drawings that I make. I'm a daily practitioner of drawing, so there are drawings that I make that also could have a digital distribution. So maybe there's a way to take some physical works and use them. So I would take the works that were already scanned and process them digitally, which was really kind of interesting experiment, because I would never have done that before, because there would never have been a way to distribute that before. So all of a sudden, the base image, which is done with gouache and pencil, goes through a process where I'm thinking about it as completely digital image, and then presenting it that way and distributing it that way, where before really you'd never thought about distributing a single frame. And lately I've discovered the site Hic et Nunc, which some of you may know about, which is a kind of obscure, I think kind of an artist site, which runs on the Tezos blockchain, which is a greener blockchain. It has a lot of good qualities. Also, the prices at Hic et Nunc are like $2 for it, and artists trade with each other. It's more like a swap meet for artists than anything. But the most exciting part of the Hic et Nunc project is that you can coin, or you can mint an NFT that is code. So you can write in the P5JS, which is a variation of the processing language, and you can put that in a package. And so I've been experimenting with taking the little code snippets, which really would never have had a home. So you could think about every icon and color panel and things I was showing, and the little code snippets, they can actually be a living piece of code, always changing, never repeating kind of process. And it can be now turned into an NFT. So NFTs could become apps. It could become places themselves of exchange. So that's sort of interesting. So for me, I'm not, I mean, of course, everyone likes to be popular. Everyone likes to make a lot of money. But my daily practice is really where my artistic growth takes place, and the degree to which I can incorporate that into, well, it's really a means of distribution. The principal change that I see when NFT came out was that there is a decentralized way of distributing and exchanging artworks, where a greater fluidity and greater transparency than there ever was online. And I think that's really exciting, and the cryptocurrency really makes that possible. So that's where I'm at.
Thank you, John and Claudia and Sylvain. So I'm a little bit almost surprised, because my thesis coming into this is that, and speaking with Juliette, is that there was some digital divide, right, where there's perhaps a traditional digital art world, and now there's this NFT world, and you have people unpack, and there may be some I wasn't sure if it had been, maybe art has never been, there's different schools and there's different things like that. But it seems like, for at least for the two of you, and maybe for Sadat as well, it's been a very natural extension of the digital artwork you were already doing in terms of either creative or collecting. So my question would be, what about the NFT space perhaps is offsetting for you? What concerns do you have? What about it do you not like? I mean, for example, is the focus purely on the commercial aspect of it? Is that overwhelming to some degree, or is that just always the in the back of your head as an artist or as a collector? So I'm wondering, just in terms of downsides, things you don't like, or things that you're hoping will be improved or resolved technologically, or things like that. Maybe John, just kicking it back to you to speak on that, and we can then cycle through everyone.
I think the primary criticism everyone has is the environmental concern, and it's a very important concern, and has to be addressed on most of the blockchains. So first and foremost, yeah, proof of work has to be looked at. Second of all, instability of crypto, which may work itself out eventually, but the fluctuation in the currency makes it difficult to know when to release, and the busyness of the blockchains makes it hard to mint sometimes, because the gas fees are very high, that kind of thing. That's a concern. Another is the smart contracts are all really great, but they don't always enjoy cross compatibility with the different platforms between Rarible, Foundation, OpenSea, et cetera. There are ways to get around the royalties and things like that and to break those contracts. And so, and I don't know if any of these have really been tested legally. I don't know the degree of it, but I think we call it a contract, but we don't really know. You would be the one to ask about that. How legal is a smart contract? How enforceable is the royalties in a smart contract? And how deeply can we get into it? I mean, as a coder and looking at a smart contract, I'm interested in like the things that they trigger, the things that you could write into a contract in the future, the kind of timing things, that the sort of code-based things you could write into it. I don't know how legal it is or how possible it is. So that's one limitation, sort of on a more personal level.
Yeah, definitely. Those are all really good thoughts. And yeah, the legality of it, right, from a intellectual property perspective, and even from a contract, right? You know, click wrap being, you know, if I check a box and accepting those things. But the same thing from John, from what you were doing with you know, I don't know if it was 32 by 32 blocks and generative art, right? So much of what I find interesting now, just seeing the different projects are the NFT projects, and that have the entire NFT, the entire artwork exists in the, you know, Solidity contract, right? So to some extent, that is it's solving, right? It's a public distribution of what you were doing, but instead it's distributed instead of it's almost a new container for something new. And anyways, I think it's really fascinating. Claudia, how about you? Concerns? Mirroring what John said.
I think I can address what John was saying about the eco problem in the same response, because one of the things we see, the problem, one of the problems for me is the idea of putting that there's this the auction. So here you put it like it's all on the meat on the auction block. There's the idea that the selling is based totally on currency, and it shows lack of respect for the work. So in response to that and the issues of the eco, what I am seeing happening is that galleries who have specialties in digital art, or nonprofits, or artists run space, a whole variety of these spaces, have been developing direct, they're using their own sites and using, for example, Monograph, which is Kevin and Carlos's platform. So to write smart contracts, which have legal recourse, and then distribute by the gallerists themselves. So you have somebody outside of the auction place, and then the choice of using POS and economic blockchains, right? POS blockchains. So it's all wrapped together in one big mush: the legal, the eco, and the commerciality, this confluence of the idea that selling art has to do with this auction, money, and not, as Sylvain was saying, when he buys something, he takes time and research and communes with the work. And, you know, usually, so art is not the same as I don't know what, you know, it's self-reflective. That's what art is. And it's not the same as a sneaker, or, you know, it's just not, because it's self-reflective. And yeah.
Sylvain, would you?
Juliette, perhaps I will be very, perhaps I will have my feet on the earth as someone who, you know, is involved in the art, as someone who collects. It means that, I buy something and I want to keep it and perhaps to transmit it in one way or another. To tell you the truth, what makes me today uncomfortable, but because I'm, as I said, into my homework period. I think that for me, the way I understand the situation today is that you can have art being created by a computer or by whatever digital way. And this art already, we know how it can be protected and how it's protected and how it's valued in one way or another. We know how a video or can be protected, whatever. We know that. We've been already through the music and the film industry, we have a kind of protection, and we know how we can manage with that. The problem today for me is very simple. When I buy an artwork, okay, today I can show my artwork wherever I want. I can loan it to a museum, I can put it in a VR, I can do whatever I want. Imagine that I buy an artwork, but someone else buy the NFT, the digital image of the artwork. What happens with my freedom to show the work? What happens? What happens today? We go to museums and we can take photos of artworks. What happens tomorrow when someone go to the Uffizi Museum and take a photo of an artwork which has been sold as an FTC? What is the consequences in terms of disseminating and democratization of art? And this, for me, is a big concern. Because I think that we have to protect the artist naturally, but also an artwork is made to be disseminated by nature. And if you put, I shall say, a lawyer behind every artwork, I think the game is not at all the same. And I don't think that I'm going to play this game. I prefer to play golf than to do something like this. Art is for me a way to enjoy my life, as not a way for me to have, I shall say, headache or to look at things in that way. So I'm in a very, I'm still waiting to see what will be the reaction of the artist in the future. And they will say to me, okay, I'll sell you the artwork, but I don't sell you the digital artwork. And this would be a problem for me.
So I follow up with your conversation, your opinion. Actually, it reminds me of several cases, especially with the burnt Banksy event. And also recently, was it Basquiat or another Banksy that was sold at Christie's, and then the seller was encouraging the buyer to destroy the real object in order to increase the value of the NFT, the image. And also,
Basquiat, yeah.
It was Basquiat, yes. So another case of Basquiat, that was the question I prepared for Moish, actually. It wasn't directly related to Sylvain's, the case that Sylvain mentioned, but it was close, which was the NFT of Basquiat's drawing, Free Comp with Pagoda, has been withdrawn from sale on OpenSea directly from the blockchain platform after the late artist's estate confirmed the seller does not own the license or rights to the work. So all these images, the rights between images, seller, buyer, and the images and the real object, all these things are very confusing now. Would you, Moish, as you are the only lawyer on this platform, if you could provide some advice or guidance to us, that would be great.
Yeah, so it's interesting, right? Because there's as Sylvain knows, right? There's speaking about, there's almost hundreds of years, right, of norms and history of how you collect art and what it means to own an art, and the implied rights of being able to display it or to put it in a museum or things like that, right? And so there is a vacuum, right? So I don't think I have all the answers. Like I can guess and use educated, this is how it works in one context, and it works on Instagram and embedding and things like that, right? So we have case law there, but there isn't in the US, there isn't like a statute. There isn't a jurisdictional decision saying, a judge saying this is what happened in this context and things like that. So, we're looking at the the Basquiat, right? There was a purchaser of a Basquiat, I believe the pagoda painting or drawing at auction, and they took a photo, made a duplication of the underlying work and created an NFT with that work and put it up for sale. Now they put it up on OpenSea, and the estate of Basquiat went to OpenSea and said, that the person who listed this doesn't have the right to do that, and there's all sorts of, they're using the Basquiat name and selling this and things like that, and so they objected, and OpenSea took it down, and the seller seemed to acquiesce to that, and that was that, right? But I don't think we really have seen, what, from a legal perspective, how these rights are going to, like, how everything's going to land, how it's going to fit. I think we have guesses, and we can project forward, what the past has shown us and what those norms are, and try to imagine that those norms will remain in the future. But there is so much about what is happening on the blockchain that is meant to be open and distributed and to be pseudonymous and resistant to being shut down, that I think it raises a lot of questions as to, sure, if you're a large platform and you're subject to US regulation, you don't want to be sued to oblivion, you're probably going to do certain things as a practical matter. But so much of this is, the possibility is to be completely open and to be resistant to takedown, to be not subject to jurisdiction, or even if subject to jurisdiction here, that if a federal judge says this must be taken down, who is the centralized authority that is going to follow that order, right? So there's so I think as artists, right, there's a lot that, as we've been talking about for the last hour, that creates this huge open opportunity, and as collectors in commerce to create new things and to create generative art that exists on the blockchain. But that also, the flip side of that is, well, once it's out there, one, what legal rights control, and two, if something goes awry, how do we put Pandora back in the box? So I can guarantee you, lawyers will be grappling with this, probably to the great consternation of collectors like Sylvain that are saying, get out of the way and let us. But I think for me, it's the huge issue. I don't think it's going away, of this ownership right, this question of which I think is also related to proving authenticity, right? Which is one of the largest benefits, and also I think one of the biggest concerns about is you're able to duplicate anything. Anyone can duplicate anything, right? You can go to a gallery and you can take a photo and you can make an NFT with it. Doesn't mean that you're Matisse, right? But all these issues are interrelated, and I think tie back to the commercial aspect of it and to the artistic aspect of it. And I think you can't sever the legal from those issues.
If I can just add something to what you said, I should say, before, the relations between an artist, a collector, was based on the idea of fair use of the artwork. I think what is important is the fair use. How do you use the artwork? And what I'm a little bit uncomfortable is that we're going to move from something which was quite flexible to something which will become much more difficult to manage as a collector. And I don't think it's really, I was telling you that we are entering into terra incognita. I think we have entered into a territory that we don't know exactly what will happen for an artwork, and how an artwork what will be the life of an artwork. And this, for me, concerns me a lot as a collector, because, once you have collected the work, and once you use this fair use notion, I think a collector should be free to do what he wants to do with the artwork. And if you take out this freedom, I think you take a big part of, I shall say, the value of an object. And this, for me, is the biggest issue for the next years, to tell you the truth.
Then I have a question for you, Sylvain. If this becomes a big concern, as you just collected your first NFT piece, how are you going to use it?
You know, I've collected because I like the artist. I've collected because I like the curator. And
that is the passion part.
No, it's not the passion. I'm very cautious with the notion of passion. I think that the collection is also something more than passion. I think it's a way to through an artwork and through an artist to vision a society, or to be challenged, or to put questions on the table. And I think that with this exhibition, Cooking in Beijing, I think that Jiang made a lot of issues on the table, put a lot of issues on the table. So I don't know what will be the value of this artwork, and I don't really care. And I don't really care because, it's now for a long time that I consider that collecting is an elegant way to burn a fortune. And I don't think that with the way we collect, especially, big works, big installations, not very marketable works, I don't think that it's the good way to look at the collection as an investment. And so this work is part of the vision that we have of the works that are relevant for us, but it's just a personal position. With the works which are relevant for us in our journey as a collector. And we'll see. I think it's a very interesting, for me, it's a very interesting way to enter into this new world, perhaps with old ideas, and makes me feel comfortable because I feel comfortable in this coherence between the new world and perhaps what could have been the old world in the way we collect.
Can I jump in for a sec?
Please.
Yeah, because Sylvain makes a great point when he says that he's collecting it because he wants to support the artist, that he likes the artist. And I think that it gives us a way to think about NFTs not as things in of themselves, as that we're collecting them. But one way I like to think of it is like shares of stock. Like when a business issues shares of stock, they do it in order to raise capital to produce more of what the business does. And so we think of an NFT this way. The collector is then investing in the career and the business of the artist to give them capital to move forward and to create more work. And the shares of stock are pieces of paper, they're symbols, and they themselves don't have any value except as they're tied to the company and as the company grows, but they can increase in value like the NFTs that you hold in an artist. So I think it's a kind of a patronage model, maybe like becoming a Patreon, but actually having a token to go with it. And it's a nice way to think about. And I think that there's a question about why some artists or NFTs are valued more highly than others. And I think some of it has to do with the fan base and the fact that those fans want to see that artist continue. There's a great volume of people that can support that work. And so sometimes you see large edition NFT sales for smaller prices, like a big IPO going for support of those artists, and they just want to do it for that kind of support. And I think that's a great way to think about NFTs on that level.
Yeah, I actually did that with the piece on Ferrophile, where it was a very large edition and you bought a share. You could look at it if you had the share, and you got a stock ticket, which was my manifesto, which looked like an inscribed page of an old illuminated manuscript or something. So and that gave you the right to share screening. And I think that's also something that really is what it is. So I love that you felt the same thing. But I wanted to ask Moish, like, what I'm very interested in is in my smart contracts as have been written by monograph, right, is that I hold the copyright. This is addressing what Sylvain said also. I maintain and hold the copyright. I have the right to show the work whenever I want, no matter who bought it. So for example, the piece that was bought from Christie's is currently in 2 museum shows, right? But I didn't have to ask to do that. And I think what Sylvain brought up about if the collector have to ask me, I never really thought about that. And the other thing that made me, so I have drawings, and the drawings of which were pages of a book, but also exist as watercolors, right? Drawings drawn, handmade by me. And then the copyright, right? So the book out of print, I want to remake the book, or what is the artwork, the NFT these will be offered as NFTs. And then my idea was to give the drawings once they're all sold to a museum that collects me anyway, right? So then what did I just do?
Okay. Before Moish gives the answer, I have to remind everybody of the time, because the 1 hour has already, yes, we are to the time's up for the panel. Actually, but why don't we just take this chance to take Claudia's question to move on onto the Q&A part. So Claudia was actually asking the first question to Moish. I guess most of the questions might go to Moish, because we certainly have many questions about the legal part, and then the policies, governmental policies and taxation. But of course, there might be other questions about the conservation and the museum part. So Moish, please go ahead. So now Q&A, if anyone has the Q&A, have the questions, please feel free to post on our chat part.
Yeah, feel free to put questions into the chat, or there's the Q&A box as well. There's already been a couple that have come in throughout the last hour that we'll try and get to. And then Claudia, I think it's for me, it's fascinating, right? Because if you have this set of expectations, right? You've been working as an artist for, and this is how it works traditionally. Well, so why should the fact that it's being sold as an NFT change any of that, right? You know, what are the default rules, and have they changed? And I think I do sense that on the one hand that there shouldn't be, right? Like much of it, like this is how I was always doing it. Like if I drew a large painting and I sold it, then, you know, I retain the copyright, but the buyer of it gets the physical painting and can put it in their living room, but they can't just start, you know, mass producing hundreds of copies of it, right? That's one of those rights you didn't have to draft a contract to say that. That's just one of those rights that's reserved, right? That's assumed to happen without a contract. So, you know, now we're talking about the world of quote unquote smart contracts, and which I think is actually a misnomer, and is probably ultimately going to create lots of confusion, because a smart contract is ultimately a piece of code. Now you can put in that piece of code, you know, description, terms of service, and link to terms of service, and I've seen all sorts of different things, but it doesn't necessarily change that original, you know, Sylvain was talking about the idea of fair use, right? And there's certain norms that have always kind of gone with that. But I think it's also a question of what is the norm now in an NFT purchase, right? You're saying I sold an NFT, but now I'm doing certain things with the underlying work, like bringing it to a museum and doing exhibitions and things like that. And you know, I'm not saying you specifically, but, you know, someone goes to Christie's and buys a $70 million piece of art and says, wait, no, why is people doing this with that art? I bought the art at auction. I spent $7, you know, so why don't I have? So I'm not sure that the consumer base necessarily knows what those rights are. And I think the question of what is a fair use both is going to relate back to the historical question of what fair use is. But two, maybe we should be thinking about whether the expectations of the purchasers are or the collectors or are now changing in this context, or whether this context of smart contracts and APIs and computer code changes the expectations of what is or is not granted. So the question for me as a lawyer is like, well, if that's all just implied, and the question of fair use in the US at least is extremely unstable. Like there's like, 4 or 5 decisions that have happened in the past maybe 3 to 5 months surrounding fair use, that if you had polled, taken a poll of 100 intellectual property attorneys and asked which way the case was going to come out, they probably would have given you, probably either 50-50 or, there's no real way to predict, right? So it's hard as an attorney to say, well, yeah, just rely on fair use. And there are obvious cases and there are not so obvious cases, and there's cases in the middle. But, for me as an attorney, it's like, well, don't you want certainty? Don't you want to put in the NFT itself, here's the rights and here's what you can do and here's what you can't? But hearing Sylvain with his comments, like, well, I don't want that as a collector. I don't want to be limited to what I can and can't do. And hearing as an artist, that doesn't sound very fun, right? To put all sorts of legal documents in there. So anyways, that's kind of where I'm coming from. And a lot of what I'm doing with clients is working on, what those platforms' terms of service should look like, what if you're an artist or you're working with artists, what rights you need to execute a sale successfully, what rights are reserved, and then in the artwork itself, whether terms should be included in that. But I think that all ties back to, again, what Sylvain was saying about, what the value of the art is and whether adding restrictions is going to diminish that. And whether, 10 years from now, is Ethereum going to be the leading blockchain? And if it's not, then what does it mean for all these really, prominent and expensive artworks that exist only on the Ethereum blockchain? And so if I bought a $70 million work of art on the Ethereum blockchain, can I wrap it and take it to the new blockchain 10 years from now? And is that a right I hold by virtue of having bought it on one blockchain? I don't know. And I'll open that up to Juliette, and then anyone else on the panel wants to comment on the legal aspects before I think we should take some comments from the audience.
Well, absolutely. I was going to remind you, save a little bit your energies, because I see 2 questions coming up for you and Sylvain. So you will have a lot to talk about. The first question comes from, if I pronounce well your name, sir, because I can't see you, Jose Carlos Casado. I apologize for my very unskilled pronunciation. However, the question goes, what do you think of the huge difference in sale in CryptoPunk comparing to quantum? Historical quantum is a historical, everybody knows, historically recognized as the first NFT. What factors are determining the recognition of NFTs? I guess if we ask Sylvain to answer this question, he would say, I don't care, it's my passion. I love this artist, right? But okay, we're ready to hear your answer, Sylvain.
You're on mute.
The truth, it's a very difficult question because I have entered into this new world just a few months ago. Like everybody we discover with the COVID, the NFT, I think it's becoming a world that is very hype. And so I like to go behind the hype and to try to understand. So to tell you the truth, I don't think I'm the right person to answer to this question. I think I have to do a little bit more homework. I think that Claudia and John can really be, I think, much more well placed to answer to this question. To tell you the truth.
I mean, I think CryptoPunks are really cool. They're considered, the first of the generation of NFTs. So I think they've taken on an aura of, well, they're the originals, right? They're the and they've also they take on that sense of being an avatar, right? So if you own one, there's a status symbol behind that, and that your ownership of that CryptoPunk serves as your online avatar. And that's a certain type of status that I want to be a person that has a CryptoPunk, or I want my friends to see that. And so there's value behind that. Whereas, well, quantum maybe it's just a work. It's really cool, but it's just a work of art. Doesn't have this whole history behind it where it provides status and value. And, so what I think it still relates back to, what is the value of art, right? Why are you collecting art in the first place? I think I'm curious what Claudia or John think.
Well, I mean, we were talking about it right before we went live about the culture of NFTs. So Jose Carlos is a friend of mine, so that's how you pronounce his name. So what I would say is that it has to do with exactly what you're saying, Moish, is that the culture of the NFT space, as it first started, had to do with it's gamified. It's a gamified space. It's like finance, currency trading, gamified and mythologized. That's how it started. Now the artists speaking to the art history and into the future, from past to future, are entering the space, but it was there before as this gamified space. And that's what struck me as I've been meeting people who were within that space. Is everybody uses avatar names, and the avatar persona, it's all mythological. And there's a lot of mythological imagery, and it has the cult of cryptography itself, the Knights of the Templar thing going on. And then the CryptoPunks are, just like you said, they're avatars. They are like the Knights of the Templar or something, as pixelized.
Of course, it's worth $11 million. It's one of 9 aliens, and it's the only one with a mask. Like, how could you even ask? Right? I mean, that's the answer, though, right?
Right. It's an alien also.
There's only 9 aliens. So that's one. It's the only one with the mask. So, I think it speaks for itself.
All right, I have to always play the bad person. I have to cut you to here. I guess we can continue the discussion in many hours after the panel, because we have 2 questions coming up. And I suggest that we stop with the 3rd question. It was sent by anonymous attendee. We will stop there. We can no more accept more questions. So the 2nd question comes from Lee Day. Sylvain, it's a question for Sylvain and Moish, you two. Regarding copyright transfer and ownership, is there an ownership difference with digital art vs physical, in that the digital work is infinitely reproducible if not controlled through copyrights?
Moish first, then after perhaps I'll complete.
So yeah, I'm looking at the question. So I think that's the question of what we were talking about, right? Is what is that difference? Are those norms that we all have been using pre NFTs? To what extent are those just going to be grafted on to NFTs? I think the problem with that is there are some new issues, the open source, pseudonymous, immutable aspect of them that raise new questions that perhaps didn't exist. But I think the flip side of that is it's also an opportunity, right? Because you think about, I was, like the Napster days, right? Where a music file is infinitely duplicated. But if I'm a record label, if I'm a musician, I have no way to control that. I have no way to monetize that. Even then as a consumer, right? Even if I want to support the artist, right? There's no direct way necessarily to do that. It's a digital rights management question, right? So I think in some ways the NFT creates a huge opportunity for both the artists for or for companies that own IP or art, and also for users and people that want to have support those artists or enjoy their artwork, to have a direct relationship, right? You can create an NFT, you can monetize it, you can sell it to your fan, and they can support you, or they can enjoy your work by doing that. And it's a way for you to regain that, digital ownership right, but in a way that is inherently commercial. So yeah, I guess that's kind of how I see both the downside and the upside to it. Help you, Ron. back on. Let's get you unmuted.
Sylvain, you are mute.
Yes, to tell you the truth, for me, the core of the problem is the notion of scarcity. If you look at all the cultural good, a part of art is about large distribution. When you speak of music, books, videos, films, the artists base their economical models not on scarcity, but on large distribution, and especially large distributions through the digital world. Now we are dealing with the digital world, where normally we should use the same ecosystem of a large distribution, but we want to adapt to this world the old model of the art world. So there is a problem. I don't have the solution, but there is a problem. This problem exists since Benjamin Franklin with the production of the artwork, but I think it's becoming more and more a problem because of the monetary and other issues. And to tell you the truth, I don't see how it will be solved. I'm very curious to see what will be in this new world with these new types of consumer, I shall call them like this, and this new world type of artworks, I shall say products, I call it like this, if I can call it like this. I really would like to see what will happen. And I'm not sure that we are, having the right solution by just authentication. I think we have to rethink the whole model at a certain time of what is the distribution of the artwork, and what is the position of an artist and the collector and the other key players. And okay, I'm not going to give any solution, but I think this is for me the issues that I think we will have to face.
Shall I move on? Thank you, Sylvain. Shall I move on to the last question?
Yep, I think so.
I don't know who will be able to answer this, but this is a sensitive question that we have already mentioned just now. Do you think it's problematic for this new market that there seems to be a relatively small group of NFT collectors with a lot of money, smaller than the usual art world may be? And those name whales, those same whales are heavily invested in the success of the blockchain economy. How much does this feel like a big marketing project? Well, in addition to this, I can give some complementary information that these big whales are also investing in the top art museums recently. From the news I read, some of them donated NFT collection to prominent museums, and some others donated money to the museum. So is it a good move, and is it normal that this small market is controlled by a small group of whales? This is our last question.
Yeah, I can speak generally to the crypto whale and the marketing project side, and then I would love to hear everyone else's take on it from a artistic side. So I think definitely the cryptocurrency, everything in cryptocurrency, you got to take everything with a big grain of salt, I think. But both, it's a hyper volatile asset class in terms of everything going up and down and trying to monetize things on like a moving landscape there. But I think everyone, the People sale, right, $69 million. It seems like that whole thing was suspect. A lot of these sales seem that there might be something else going on, right? So I think you always have to be a little skeptical. Everything in cryptocurrency, right? But on the same token, it's quite obvious that there are very high net worth people now that have high net worth in cryptocurrency, and so it's a new class of consumer, right? They have high net worth cryptocurrency. They believe the reason they have that is because they believe in the project or they got in early, and so they're invested, they're interested, and they want to keep their money, I think, in large part in cryptocurrency. And so they're spending their cryptocurrency on things within the cryptocurrency economy that have meaning to them, like art, right? They can enjoy their status as a cryptocurrency person that way. So I'm curious, for the panelists, what you think about that, and whether that changes. Do you think about making art for that kind of person? Do you ignore it? Is this different from the patronage model of the Renaissance, where it's a much more unequal model, right? Because there's very high net worth people, and if they're the only people that can afford things, and you're not able to sell to regular consumers, then it's all sorts. It's an even bigger issue. But John, why don't we do John, Sylvan, and Claudia, and then we'll wrap up, and hopefully by 1:30.
You can go, Claudia. I think you had something.
There's one, is it that different from the regular art world? When you talk about the dominance of certain collectors who sit on boards of museums, and what gets shown in a museum has to do with those people. That's number one, but I don't think it is. But number two is, the weird thing is anonymity, because I would say, this is probably true for you too, like people who collect digital, they weren't giant speculators. They're more like Sylvan doing it for love. And I know them. And I have conversations with them. And now there are people who I don't know even who they are. I don't know their names. And somehow that's different, very different.
I think we see a pattern that's common in a market, also in nature, that there's usually a few very large things, then a certain number of medium-sized things, and a whole bunch of small things. It's sometimes how it breaks out. And one of the criticisms of the NFT space trying to be so decentralized was that it was mimicking the patterns. But I think it's for me, and it was also talked about when the web first came on, this whole long tail idea that there'll be a few stars, and then there'll be much more out there on the tail for people to do. There'll be more access to people, like, because of cryptocurrency and because of the fluidity of the transactions and the relative low cost of transferring currencies. You have a worldwide market where you may never have had one before, and you don't have the friction of distribution of physical objects. So on the high end, a few people are buying things for whatever reasons they have. They have a lot of cryptocurrency, or they want some certain kind of status, or they want to build up an artist for many reasons. But there's also going on out there much more on all sorts of levels and in all sorts of geographies that I think makes it a broader and much more interesting market.
In the art world, there is a lot of shooting stars. I've been in the art world for 37 years, and I've seen a lot of shooting stars in the art world. And so, once again, you have to make your own journey as a collector, and you let the others do whatever they want, and that's it. And it's not about judging the others. I think everybody has its own agenda. If someone wants to spend money on something, a lot of money, because he has a lot of money, his problem. It's not my problem. And I really don't care. I think that what is important is that a collection is a journey, a personal journey. It's not linked to objects. And I'm not speaking by love, I'm speaking by the fact that for me, a collection is not about passion. It's about the way to look at things, about the way to encounter people, and also about the way to look at the society with the eyes of your time. And NFTs, part of the eyes of our time. I'll try to take the best part of it. Not sure that I will succeed, but at least I think NFT is here to stay. There will be a lot of different types of NFT. And the other thing which is interesting with NFT, for me, is that it gave the chance to put the light on artists who before were totally ignored. And I think this is very important that we have this kind of, new generation of artists or new types of artists who are not the usual suspects. And I think this is something very, very important. And I encourage you to keep on doing what you're doing because I think that we need also to have a diverse voice in the art world. Even this voice has to be stronger.
Thank you, Sylvain. That's a perfect note to wrap on. I think we've covered a lot today and hopefully given everyone a lot to think about. Thank you so much to Juliette for co-moderating with me and for bringing in our spectacular panelists. I know I learned a lot. John, Sylvain, Claudia, thank you so much for joining us today, spending time with us, and thank you everyone for attending. And until next time, this is part 1 of 2. So we will be sending everyone information about part 2. And until then, good luck and have a nice weekend, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Merci.
Thanks, everyone.